Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, today's video, I'm going to be going over 6 signs God is preparing you for isolation. So, why is isolation important in our daily life? Why is isolation needed for us to develop ourselves and to rediscover our hidden capabilities, to rediscover our hidden talents, our hidden uh, our hidden consciousness that has been lying dormant forever how long in our lives. See, we have individuals such as Yeshua, Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, Babaji, Pythagoras, all these different individuals. These individuals were in a period of isolation. They had taken out of their time and out of their portion of their life to be in this isolation period. Now, when you're in this isolation period, not only are you in a period or in a state of being in tune with yourself, but you're also being in tune with your higher self, with your higher consciousness, with your higher being, right? You're taking this time out of your day to be with God and be with the universe and to establish a relationship with God and to establish a relationship with the universe so you can rediscover and change into that mode and change into that identity that's been placed within your reality, right? Because this is your reality. This is placed. The universe has conspired this to be within your reality, to be in this isolation period, right? So in today's video, I'm going to be going over the 6 signs God is preparing you for isolation. So let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first sign that God is preparing you for isolation is you start making a conscious decision to change, right? Which is an identity shift. Now, I will be making a video on this pretty soon, but the first sign is you start to have that conscious decision to change. Maybe in your life you were a troublemaker. You were a person who was always getting into trouble, or you were this person who was caught up in addiction, or you were this person who was not in line with your true self. You might have been lost. You might have been, saying to yourself, what is my purpose on this planet? What is my purpose on this earth? What am I meant to do? I'm doing all these things. I'm working these jobs. I'm trying to accomplish this and that. I'm chasing the bag. I'm chasing the money, but none of this stuff is fulfilling me. Right? None of this stuff is, making me happy internally. What is my main goal? What is my main, drive to overall satisfy me in a positive way, in a positive direction? So the universe is conspiring you to be in this isolation period since you are in this position to where you want to change. You want to, grow as a person. You don't want to be stuck in your old ways. You don't want to inhabit this image that you have built up throughout your life, right? You are ready to shed your old skin. You are ready to put that old self to the back burner, and you're ready to shift into that new identity. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, right? This isn't a one day thing, a 1 hour thing. Developing this new identity, shifting into this new identity, it takes time. So most of the time it may take even years. It's a stepping stone. It's a building block. A block after block after block, a stepping stone after stepping stone after stepping stone. It takes time to shift into this new identity, right? So when you throughout your life, you may have developed these addictions. You may have developed these habits. You might have developed these destructive patterns and the destructive ways throughout your life. And you've been doing this for years and years and years, right? And you have developed this energy, this entity that's been latched onto you for however many months, years, whatever the case may be. So it's going to take some work and some dedication and some visualization, some affirmation, some shadow work, groundwork, internal work. It's going to take all these things to shift into that new identity about yourself. including me. I was in that same predicament as well. It wasn't a one-day thing for me. It wasn't a week thing for me. It took time for me to get to this position. It took hard work and dedication and the grace of God for me to be in this position, right? So when you are, when you're shifting to that new identity, you may want to, dress a certain way. The imagination is a very powerful thing. So you may want to, if you're wanting to become a successful entrepreneur, a successful business person, you might want to dress the part. You start dressing like a business person, dressing like an entrepreneur. Or if you want, you may visualize yourself doing certain things, looking a certain way, playing the part, playing the role, because the subconscious mind can't tell the difference between what is real and what is not. So when you are, dressing the part, you may want to dress the part. You may want to, perform the necessary actions to do a certain thing. It tricks the subconscious mind into already believing that you are that person. It's always about being in that state of being, right? Most people want to take action and then they start to see results, but you already have to be in that position. You already have to look the part, right? If you look the part and you perform that, you are internalizing this into your subconscious, into your eternal being, then that's when that identity shift and that's when that manifestation, all these other different things start to kick into high drive. So it's always being that person, acting as if you are already that person, acting as if you have already achieved this certain outcome or achieved this certain success. And that starts with that identity shift, right? So the first sign that God's preparing you for isolation is you make that conscious decision to change. You are morphing into that new identity about yourself. Second sign God's preparing you for isolation is you have the urge to be alone. Now I want to put on the emphasis on, or quote unquote, being alone, right? So there's a difference between being lonely and being alone. Most people don't like the fact of being alone, right? They're afraid of being lonely. Especially the extroverts out there, right? They don't like being alone. They don't, they can't stand the fact of being alone. They don't like the image or, just thinking about being by themselves, right? And this is an internal thing. Most of the time, this is an internal thing. This is a subconscious thing, right? Because most people, they don't like what they see in the mirror. They don't like, when you're alone, when you're by yourself, you have to face your inner demons. You have to face yourself. You're in this time period. You're in this setting, in this mode to where you have to face yourself. And most people, they try to avoid that. They try to be around other people. They try to go on vacation. Trying to be in a relationship when they're not ready for a relationship. They try to do all these different things and try to seek external validation and seek external things because they don't want to face the fact that they need to work on themselves. They don't want to face the fact that they need to, work on their shadow, doing the shadow work, doing the internal work. Okay. So that's why God is preparing you for you to be in this isolation period so you can work on yourself, to face yourself, to look yourself in the mirror and telling yourself and telling yourself that you are willing to change. You are willing to make certain sacrifices. You are willing to let go of everybody within your circle for the time being, whether it be family, friends, whatever the case may be. You're willing to make certain sacrifices and make certain decisions that you are not necessarily comfortable with, right? And you are in this period of isolation and being alone, which you are not really alone because you have the whole universe and God by your side, but you are in this position where you are to yourself and where you're by yourself to establish this relationship with God, to establish your relationship with your higher self, establish a relationship with your ancestors, and all these other different things, right? So the second sign God's preparing you for isolation is you have the urge to be alone. You have the urge to be by yourself for the time being because being around a whole bunch of people, being around certain people, especially people who aren't meant to be in your life, is a total distraction, right? And when you're by yourself, when you're to yourself, you have that mental clarity, right? I notice that when I'm by myself versus when I'm with other people, I tend to have more mental clarity. I have more ideas. I have more video ideas. I have more creativity flowing through my body, flowing through my mind, right? And I have more peace when I'm by myself. I know a lot of you can relate to that. So the second sign that God's preparing you for isolation is you have the urge to be alone. Third sign God's preparing you for isolation is you start losing friends and or family. Now, I mentioned a little bit this earlier. When you are in that shift to, when you're in that identity shift, when God is, changing you and shifting you into that new identity, when God is preparing you to become the greatest version of yourselves, when you're stepping into that new portal in life, when you're stepping into that new dimension in life, people that you have been hanging around with in the past, you may have been hanging around with certain people in the past, or you might have been in some type of toxic relationship or toxic friendship, being around certain toxic family members. When you're in this transition into a new reality, when you're in transition into that new reality, there are certain people in your life that you can't bring with you, right? Because people, certain people that you have may been around, or certain people that you may have associated yourself with, you can't bring those people to your new reality. Those people can't transition with you, right? Many people in your life for different reasons and for different seasons and all these other different things. So when you are in this transition, when you are being in this isolation period, right, when God is removing you from certain people and certain situations and certain environments, and you're to yourself, you start to lose friends and family, right? This may be, this may be a temporary thing, or this may be a permanent thing, depending on the type of life you're living and the type of people that you are associating yourself with, or you have associated yourself with, right? So when you're stepping into that new identity shift, when you're stepping into that new mode about yourself, when you're stepping into that new reality, right, manifesting a new reality, manifesting a new self-image, there are certain people in your life that you are going to lose. There are certain people that you can't bring with you, right? You may be friends with certain people, and you may can't see yourself, losing them or not being with them. But people step out of your life. People are, removed from your life for a reason. That's why we have to trust God and trust the universe that is doing the best for us, right? We may tend to think that, our ego wants to think that, we believe that, certain things is the best thing for us, or certain decisions that we make, or certain things that we come up with or think about. We may believe that these things are the best for us, but God says otherwise. The universe says otherwise. Your ancestors who are in a healthy, positive relationship with you that wants the best for you, they think otherwise. So we have to trust in our inner intuition. We have to trust our gut feeling, right? Especially if we're in alignment with God and the universe. We have to trust that God and the universe knows what's best for us, right? And so certain people and certain family members are going to be removed from your life. Fourth sign, God is preparing you for isolation. You're continuing your education, aka knowledge, right? So within the school system, the public education system, the private education system, you know how the system works, because this is all part of the matrix. We go to school, we go to these prison camps as kids. School is just like prison camps. We start to lose our creative ability. We have to raise our hand, speak when we're spoken to, walk in single file line. School is much like prison. At least that's how I felt that it was, because I've always hated school. At the time, I didn't know why I hated school, but as I gotten older and as I, started gaining more knowledge and wisdom, now I notice why I hated school so much as a kid. right? Because school only teaches you the bare minimum. School only teaches you the bare minimum to prepare you for the workforce. The school system, it doesn't really teach you anything. It doesn't teach you of value. It doesn't teach you about yourself. It doesn't teach you about finances, how to make a certain amount of income. It doesn't teach you, reality creation, attaining higher consciousness, developing relationships with people. School doesn't teach you that at all. Like, the school system is a part of the matrix, and we're our parents, grown parents who have kids, we were sending these kids to these prison camps, and we're just pumping out slave after slave after slave after slave, right? And then same thing with college, same thing with universities. We go into these colleges and institutions, and then we end up being in debt, in student debt. We have to pay these loans for years and years and years to come. So it's all part of the matrix. It's all part of this illusion that we exist in. So because for me, I learned more about myself and I learned more about the world around me after I graduated school, right? I learned more about myself and I learned more about who I am as a person, internally and externally, and I learned more about the world around me. I learned more about the matrix in the world around me than I ever did when I was in school, right? So, we're continuing our education, right? We're in this isolation period where we're to ourselves. You might start reading books. You might start reading, metaphysical books. You might start reading, the Bible, finding out the esoteric meaning behind the Bible. You start reading more about, finances. Start reading, scientific books, spiritual books. You're always, gaining knowledge and wisdom, right? As well as personal experience, right? Personal experience and, reading books and, just gaining more knowledge and wisdom, right? Because there's an example, Malcolm X, he was in prison, right? When he was younger, he was doing, stupid things as a kid, and he ended up in prison. While he was in prison, he was isolated in prison, he was studying the works of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, right? So when we're, God puts things into our lives. God, utilizes different things in our lives in order for us to learn more about ourselves and to learn from other people, to learn from other masters and to learn from other teachers, in order for us to gain more knowledge and to increase our awareness and to increase our consciousness, so we can utilize these teachings that God has given us, that the universe has given us, to help ourselves and to help other people, and to preach the truth, basically, to preach knowledge and to preach the truth, so we can, ascend the collective consciousness and to raise the overall consciousness of the planet to realize who they truly are as eternal beings, right? So the fourth sign God is preparing you for isolation is you are continuing your education, you are gaining knowledge, you are gaining wisdom, and you are gaining insight into what you already know, because everything exists within us. Because when we unlock our DNA, when we unlock certain codes and certain patterns within our DNA structure, we start to gain information, to gain knowledge 15 to 20 generations back, because all that exists within us. Fifth sign, God is preparing you for isolation. You are no longer interested in the things of your past. Now, for me, this is true for me. I used to be into a whole bunch of other different things. I used to have a porn addiction back in the day. I had a porn addiction for about like 10 years. And, it was very destructive. All these sorts of different addictions. We might have been addicted to porn. We might have been addicted to, smoking weed. We might have been addicted to all sorts of different things. We might have been watching, certain people or watching certain videos, always trying to entertain ourselves all the time. We might have been, just watching stuff that's not really in alignment with ourselves and, not in alignment with our true purpose. We're just distracting ourselves, indulging ourselves, emotionally feeding ourselves to destruction and all these sorts of different things. But when we step into our divine purpose, when we are in the period of isolation, when God's preparing us for isolation, when God's preparing us to be in this new mode, in this new transition within our reality, we start to indulge in, different things. We start to engage in practice. We start to engage in things that are beneficial towards us. Like certain spiritual practices, which I'm about to go over in the next point. Certain spiritual practices, certain holistic practices. We might start eating differently. We might start, we might start watching different people than we did in the past. People that are, encouraging other people, helping people, teaching people. We might start developing new relationships with other people. We might start hanging around with, different people than we did in the past. In the past, we might have, hung out with people who got us in trouble, who might have, influenced us in the wrong way, influenced us in the wrong direction. Now we're developing wholehearted relationships. We might be, developing relationships with certain family members that we didn't necessarily have a relationship with in the past. We start doing different things, basically. Start doing different things, engaging in different practices, that are not destructive to our health, not destructive to our mental health, not destructive to our physical health, and all these sorts of different things. So the fifth sign, God's preparing you for isolation. You start developing, doing more productive things that are better for your heart, better for your relationship with God, the universe, with yourself, and other people around you. And the last and final sign, God's preparing you for isolation. You start engaging in a more spiritual / holistic lifestyle, right? We might start engaging in certain things like, meditation, grounding, earthing, getting sunlight, going out in nature, doing all these spiritual things, doing all these holistic things, eating more healthier foods, doing things that are in the betterment of our soul, in the betterment of our spirit. So since we, been in this isolation period and we have developed a true, rich spiritual relationship with ourselves, we start to, live more for the soul and live more for the spirit and not much of the flesh, right? So we put the soul first. We put the spirit first. So we tend to do different things that are in the betterment of our emotional health, in the betterment of our spiritual health, in the betterment of our physical health, right? So we might be, if you might have, done certain things like, like I said in the beginning, like smoking weed. Not saying there's anything wrong with smoking weed, but it's all about balance at the end of the day. We might have done some destructive things in our past, but now since we have transitioned over and we're in this isolation period where we're able to focus on ourselves more, we start doing the necessary things that is going to better us in the long run. Start engaging in certain practices, in certain habits, and certain activities that are going to be better for us in the long run when it comes to our mental, physical, and spiritual, the 3 planes of existence. All right. So there you have it, guys. These are the 6 signs God's preparing you for isolation. First sign, you start making a conscious decision to change, which is that identity shift. You have the urge to be alone, quote unquote alone. You're not alone. You're with God in the universe. All that exists within you. The kingdom of God is within you. You start losing friends and or family. You're continuing your education, aka knowledge, the real knowledge. You're no longer interested in the things of your past. And lastly, you start engaging in a more spiritual / holistic lifestyle. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. If you're in this period of isolation when God's preparing you to be in this position of isolation, don't utilize this time to just do nothing with your life, to go back to your old ways, to go back to your old destructive ways. Utilize this time to, develop a healthy relationship with yourself. Once you start developing a healthier relationship with yourself, you're able to establish more healthy relationships with other people, right? Most people, they try to, jump from relationship to relationship, and they wonder why their relationships are not working out. Once you start developing a holistic relationship with yourself and to start establishing a loving relationship with yourself and understand who you truly are and understand who you are as a person, then that's when you're able to understand most of the time you're able to understand other people. You're able to establish more healthier, happy relationships, loving relationships with other people. So utilize this opportunity, utilize this isolation period to rediscover your hidden capabilities, to love yourself no matter what, to establish self-worth, and to establish a holistic relationship with God and the universe. All right? So until next time, and always remember, all power resides from within. And always keep the faith, because God in the universe is always looking for you. Take care, guys, and God bless.